Jeff Sandy talks about why he volunteered for a very dangerous mission in Iraq.
My father landed at Utah Beach on D-Day.
Wow.
277 straight days of combat. Only a couple dozen of his unit that landed at Utah Beach was alive at the end of the war. And no matter what they threw at me, it was my patriotic duty to my country to use the expertise that I had learned to try to do something to help our country. And let me tell you another piece of why I volunteered. The president of United Bank in West Virginia, Richard Adams' daughter died at the World Trade Center.
Welcome to Game of Crimes.
Well, we're very fortunate in West Virginia. We have a wonderful National Guard, and we provide training for countries all over the world. And because of the strip mining, coal mining operations, you have vast amount of property there which has been reclaimed. The rivers for swiftwater rescue. It's just this past year we had a national exercise here, which military from all over the United States, which my office, Department of Homeland Security, was involved. It's just there's so many. West Virginia's got such a wide area of wilderness and property and rivers and in former coal mines and stuff. It's a wonderful place to train.
Yeah, and I've talked to some guys, allegedly, that may have been out in that area, but it's like, yeah, just fabulous stuff out there. But
hey,
go ahead.
Before we move on, Jeff, did you ever know Mark Wills used to be a member of the West Virginia State Legislature?
I did not, sir.
He's a judge down in Mercer County now. He's my best friend from high school. He went to WVU Law School, came out, and one of the few politicians or former politicians that I can say I trust 100%. Just curious.
Where did he go to school at? He went to WVU?
WVU.
Ah, darn. Okay. If he'd gone to Marshall, you could have trusted him. But anyway.
Well, no. we don't have a law school at Marshall. So they're one up on us on that.
I wouldn't say that. No, not having lawyers on your campus, to me, that's actually kind of a good thing. But anyway, going back to the terrorism angle, though. So you got this cryptic email. You say, "Hey, we want you to live." Did they mention anything about sand or black fleas, or they just left that off of that?
They left it off, sir.
Now, there's a reason why. Okay, so walk us through the story now, because 9/11 has just happened. We're in Afghanistan. And we're now approaching a point too, though it'll be a couple years later, but where they look at addressing the threat at that time, what they call coming from Iraq and Saddam Hussein, because he's already invaded Kuwait. That was the first Gulf War. So, but walk us through now. So you get this cryptic email. How does your life change? You do your 30 days and then what?
Well, I was asked to volunteer.
Isn't that a contradiction in terms?
Well, yes, I was asked to volunteer, and this is before the war started, by the way. I think that's important to note.
Not before the Afghanistan war started. You're talking about before the Iraq war started.
Correct. And we were sent to Texas for desert training, and you name a shot, we got it. I mean, I've never had so many shots in my life. I mean, everyone was sticking needles in your arm and everything else, and going into these gas chambers with a mask on to make sure that they did not leak. And it was, getting you prepared to go to be deployed. And eventually the event starts, and in Iraq. And within a few weeks after that started is when the first Treasury agents, myself and two other guys, we were sent to the Middle East, and from there we worked on counterterrorism, tracing the monies of where the money went for Iraq, and I can talk to you about that because that's been on national TV. But we.
Hey Jeff, before we get into that, let's back up a little bit. I want to talk to you a little bit though about your training, because you're an IRS dude. I mean, the worst thing your training, they taught you how to treat a paper cut, right? Because you're dealing with so many documents. I'm just kidding. But but you go from that. I know you guys were 1811s, badge carrying, gun carrying, federal agents. But how much different was it to go through this kind of training to deploy over there? Did you start going, wow, this is like the real thing. This isn't like, when we used to do operations with the state police or the FBI. How much of a paradigm shift was that for you based on the way the military was preparing you?
Well, Morgan, if I may back up just a minute.
Sure.
My father landed at Utah Beach on D-Day.
Wow.
277 straight days of combat. Only a couple dozen of his unit that landed at Utah Beach was alive at the end of the war. And no matter what they threw at me, it was my patriotic duty to my country to use the expertise that I had learned to try to do something to help our country. And let me tell you another piece of why I volunteered. The president of United Bank in West Virginia, Richard Adams' daughter died at the World Trade Center. And I had met her, just a beautiful girl. They never found her body. So two reasons why it did not matter what was going to happen. I felt with what I had learned in Cleveland and West Virginia and in life, I could help.
Wow, what a backstory. In fact, as we're recording this, it's June 9th. June 6th was the anniversary of D-Day, the greatest generation. My dad was a World War II and a Vietnam vet. And so, it's like you just think about what these guys faced when those gates on those landing craft came down. They're storming the beaches. I think just a quick sidebar, but one of the greatest speeches I think I ever heard given was by President Reagan at Normandy, called The Boys of Pointe du Hoc. And he's talking about the 75th Rangers scaling the cliffs, what those guys went through. They fell, they were killed, but they kept going, they kept moving, and just the sacrifices. I mean, it's you guys, and you're right. I mean, that's what a powerful way to say, why are you over there? And it becomes very easy. It's like, doesn't matter if there's sand or fleas or whatever else. Right. This is a tradition.
Right. Well, this is what we call patriotism, and I didn't know that about you, Jeff, and I have even more respect for you now than I did before. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're talking to a true patriot today.
Gentlemen, 10 years ago on June the 6th, I took my entire family to Normandy, and we were on the beach there on June the 6th. And I am blessed that financially that I have been able to travel, starting in England, going to Utah Beach, following my dad's steps all the way through France, Belgium, Luxembourg, Germany, and back down to, and I'll pronounce this wrong, it's VOC, but it's pronounced Wicklow, Austria, where my dad was on the last day of World War II.
Wow. Did you go through Bastogne?
Yes, my dad's unit, and I've got a copy of it, the Washington Post. My dad's unit was the unit that went in and met the airborne.
Wow.
And I have got that fully documented, that Patton's 3rd Army, 317th Company K Washington Post quoted them. They have reached the airborne.
Yeah, my dad was in Europe during World War II also, but he was after the invasions, but actually passed through Bastogne there as well. And this is after, if you've seen Band of Brothers and they show Easy Company over there, this is after all of their experiences. But, just the fact that during that time, my dad should have been 4F when he went to join the military because he had very poor sight in one eye. And you'll appreciate this. This is how dedicated everybody was back then to this threat to our country. They had, when they were testing his left eye, they said, okay, cover your right eye. So he used his right hand to cover his right eye. They said, now cover your left eye. He used his left hand to cover his right eye. So, and they didn't catch on that. But, that's the length that the people were dedicated to go to, to serve their country back then.
Well, there's stories of guys,
the greatest generation. Holy cow.
There's stories of guys without birth certificates saying, hey, I'm 16 or I'm 17 or 18 years old when they were 14 or 15, but I will tell you one quick aside too. I thought a great speech from Colin Powell when he was Secretary of State. It's when people were talking about this. America's just trying to grab land. They're just trying to do this. We're just, an invading force. We want to do conquest. He was at the UN. He said, the only ground the United States have ever asked for is enough to bury the bodies of our soldiers who died fighting for your country.
Absolutely.
By the way, too, funny. We'll get back to the story, but my son-in-law is a Marine formerly on active duty, served in the Second Gulf War under General Mattis, and he's got a big sign on the side of their house that says, "If you can read this sign, thank your If you can read this sign, thank your military. If you can read this sign, thank your teacher. If you can read it in English, thank your military." And it's an old, basically World War II sign. A lot of people would be speaking German and Japanese today if it wasn't for the United States, Canada, Australia, many of these countries who've helped fight the war. So
absolutely.
Dude, how do you recover from that? It's like, you can't be funny when you say something like that. So let's be serious then. So you signed up for this. I mean, it didn't matter if you were voluntold, you were going to go. So, but I kind of go back to that thing. We said, what was the paradigm shift you had between your law enforcement training and now the way the military was prepping you for this work?
Well, the Iraqi regime was organized crime. So everything that I had investigated during my career, it was what I investigated in Iraq it was identical. It was identical. Just to let your readers know, the international language for translation is English. And people say, oh, how did you operate, Jeff? How did you operate? Well, in the bombed out the Central National Bank of Iraq and the Raffian Bank, in the records, you had the Arabic version, you had the English version, and you had what it was translated to. So we were all able to rapidly work on the investigation because we already had a translation. So that was very important to us. And the other thing, Morgan, is as a federal agent, we are taught how to interview people. And that is the key to any investigation. You can be the biggest ass law enforcement officer, but if you cannot communicate with individuals, you can't reach your full potential. And I hope I don't insult anybody by saying that. Interviewing is the key in law enforcement, and I feel that's what our federal agents brought with us to Baghdad.
And, you hit upon a real good part. So I don't know if you ever went through the Reed method of interview and interrogation. Does that sound familiar?
I have. When I was sheriff, I sent people to it, but I have not.
Well, I was the first outside instructor for John Reed and Associates. And actually, one of the places I got to teach was the NSA. We taught, to your point, they had a lot of damage assessment agents that got good at the polygraph, but they lost their interview skills. And so we had to go back and kind of reinforce your interview skills. And I will tell you, too, to this day, I solved more cases, I think, through interview and interrogation than I did through physical evidence. Getting admissions from people, even if they don't tell you the truth, but if you can get them to tell you something and it's a lie and you can document that. I used to tell people it's much easier for me to prove a lie than it is the truth, because the truth is incontrovertible. A lie is not. And just
I agree with you, Morgan. I agree with you. But interviewing
Yep.
Can, before you even go through mountains and mountains of evidence, if you have the ability to interview, you can save countless investigative hours.
Yeah, and I'll tell you too, down at Gitmo, some of the people they brought down to Gitmo to help do interviews down there were NYPD cops, LAPD cops, guys that and girls that were used to doing interviews and interrogations of gang members, criminal suspects, and so that served them well down there. But let's back up a little bit and talk about how your mission started. So, like I said, you've gone through the military. Now, did they give you any kind of weapons training in addition to that, or were you just going to carry what you normally carried?
My weapon, and that's a story, my weapon that I loved was a Sig Sauer 226.
Me too.
That weapon was one of the greatest shooting weapons, and I would have given one of my body parts if I could have even let them cut it in half when I retired, if I could have taken it with me. But Treasury would not, and I found out ATF, they won't let you do that either. I didn't know about DEA, but I carried my IRS assigned Sig Sauer, and in fact, hopefully the statute of limitations, but I took with me 147 grain subsonic hollow points, and that was not an approved NATO round. You had to use the ball ammo. And when I left Iraq, you would not believe the people that were coming up to me. Please give me a magazine full of that. Please give me a magazine full of it. But no, we shot a qualifications course put on by the United States Army, and then with our M4s, we had to qualify. And then when we reached Baghdad, we also had to again show them that we could qualify with our handgun and the M4.
Let's talk about that journey getting to Baghdad. So, very interesting. Did you have to fly? Did you get to fly at least decent transport over, or were you on military transport going over to Baghdad?
No, they had commercial. They obtained companies that would fly us, and so we had going over. I had a comfortable seat. Coming back wasn't so comfortable.
But at least did you get first class and a decent meal or anything going over before, one of your final decent meals before you hit the sand?
The seat was very comfortable, was not first class. There were no first class seats on the plane, and the food was your typical airline food, sir.
Ah, darn.
No cocktails. You could have all the water and pop you wanted.
So once you hit the ground, how do you get this cryptic email? Now you volunteer, they assign you and two other folks. When they brief you on this mission, what is your brief? What is going to be your remit for this operation? What are you there to do in Baghdad?
My job is to find out where the money that was in the bank accounts for the people of Iraq, where that money was. Where it was. That was the main thrust. Second thrust was the United Nations oil for food fraud. And the third was, during our interviews, always asked about weapons of mass destruction.
So, all right. So you've got kind of the triumvirate of things you have to go after. Obviously, we know this. We won't dive into the WMD because we've had a guest on talk about that, and that's well documented. But the financial standpoint, did they give you a scope of the problem when you went in there? Are you talking about hundreds of millions, billions of dollars? Do you guys have an idea of the scope before you start digging in?
It was over $300 billion with a B.
Well, okay. You got my attention there. 300 billion. And what was the purpose of doing this investigation? I mean, there's other things to say. Look, I mean, are you really going to bring somebody back to the U.S. and try them, or are you looking to repatriate money back to the citizens of Iraq for post-war reconstruction and survival? What's the ultimate goal for doing this investigation?
Number one, keep the money out of terrorist hands. Number two, get the money and give it back to the people of Iraq so they can build a strong country.
$300 billion is an awful lot of terrorism financing.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
Now, in parallel to that, did you have anything to do with the when I say Holy Land, you're familiar with that one, right?
Yes. I did not have anything to do with that until after I retired, and I was hired by a company out of Washington, D.C. to help financial institutions investigate terrorism finance. And I was at a particular bank in the United States where the bank was being sanctioned for not doing thorough reviews of that money, sir.
Yeah, because just for our players out there, the Holy Land Foundation was the largest terrorism financing case. I don't know if it's still that to this day. And the host, there were a lot of people. There were a lot of what they call unindicted co-conspirators, but the list is long. And the judge, I think, the judge was. I don't know if he was so disturbed by the evidence, but he wanted to make sure there's a clear record. It is all published. I think out of the court. The court was in Houston, if I remember right, and was all published. So anyway. Kind of setting the stage because what we're talking about, like we said, Loudoun County, Fairfax County at that time doing the raids on terrorism financing. This leads back over to Baghdad. So tell us about digging in. How do you get started looking for $300 billion?
Well, my hat's off to our United States military. They would go into businesses and they would grasp all the financial records in bombed out buildings that were blown up, the Central National Bank of Iraq, gather up the records. And those records were taken to Qatar, the country of Qatar. Some people call it Qatar. And just wonderful intelligence analysts for our great military would 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, they would go through records. Everything would be scanned, go through massive amount of records. And so not one person, not a group of people, it took a massive amount of people to gather the intelligence and have it so it could be analyzed.
Yeah, the military and the government always have to have their terms. So I think they would call that document exploitation. They would call it DocX and things like that. But you're right. It takes, when you think about the number of people it takes to do something like that, and just get you the intelligence value out. So give us a scope of that too. When you said you had the military out there, you had the analysts. How many people are we talking about? You got 3 IRS agents. You're like, I feel you're like Murphy and Pena, the war on drugs. Who do they send down to combat the war on drugs? 2 DEA agents to go after Pablo Escobar. You got to feel kind of like that. Like there's 3 of us here and we're going after Saddam Hussein, and all of the ill-gotten gains.
Right. Again, during the first few days that we're there, we are introduced to every shift of the workers. We tell them what I told you, what our mission is. And it was just outstanding. You had a major, sergeant, whatever, come up to you and said, Mr. Sandy, would you please look at this and analyze this? Tell us what you think of this. So the article that I wrote for that you have received, that was based on being able to understand their records and how their mindset worked. So a lot of different factors came into it. Was interviewing saved a lot of time, and the great people of our military being able to go through massive amount of records.
And this article you're talking about, it was in the July 26th magazine called The Counter-Terrorist, right?
That is correct, sir.
Yeah. See, there you go with that sir again, Jeff. We're going to have to retrain you.
I know it. It's my West Virginia upbringing.
He's a gentleman. We're not.
Well,
Used
I just
to having
thought he
gentlemen on
naturally recognized the command presence that I brought to the, even with all my hair, I got to go get a haircut. But yeah, so it's the counterterrorism article, and it's, I mean, Reddit. Well, what are you laughing at, Murph? Dude, not only are you losing hair, you're about to lose a knee too. Tomorrow you got to go in and get that knee looked at, which is why we can't record tomorrow, because you'll be on pain meds, and heaven knows what you might say.
Oh yeah, we might really give you down the road then.
We have fun, Jeff. Hey, thanks for playing along. But so you get started doing this. Tell us, how does this unfold? So let's bookend this though, which talking about how long. We'll get through the whole story, but how long were you in country till your mission, when your mission ended?
Approximately 120 days.
Okay. So let's talk. Let's kind of work through those 4 months there. So how did things unfold? How did things progress?
Well, one of our mission was to interview people on the decks of cards, the high-ranking Iraqi officials that were familiar with how the money moved and operated in the country. So obviously that would be your finance minister, the former ambassador to Switzerland, Barzan al-Tahidi, and the person that really helped our country out was Tariq Aziz, the deputy prime minister of Iraq, who was also the spokesperson who often came to the United Nations and spoke. So interviewing those individuals was saved thousands of hours of investigative time.
Let's talk about Tariq Aziz, because you're right. He was the face, basically, of the war for a long time. He could go places where Saddam wouldn't go, because he was afraid of getting assassinated, arrested, whatever else, if he left Iraq. So, when was your first contact with Tariq Aziz?
Approximately 3 weeks upon my arrival in Baghdad. You had how it worked. You put in a request with the military approved it, and then you would go out to the prison, and they would place you in an interview room with the individual, in this case, Tariq Aziz.
Now, we should note, too, that Tariq actually turned himself in. He was not captured. I mean, he kind of knew what was coming, right?
I cannot answer that. If I could, I would, but I do not know how he got imprisoned.
Well, they famously had this deck of cards, so they would be looking for people in Baghdad, Bob, and the other ones too. But I think Tariq is being kind of the politician type he is. He kind of knew it would be better to be on Team America than it would be to have the Americans hunting for you. But that being said, tell us about the prison too. What was that environment like? You go in there.
I got to tell you guys, as former law enforcement, I felt so sorry for those guards, correction officers, at the MPs at the military prison. I'd never seen so many flies in my life. They were there, and they would have their AR-15s, they would have their handguns, but what they had was fly swatters. And I mean, it was so bad. I'd never seen so many flies in my life, guys. It was just, swarms of flies. Wow. And when I would leave every day, I would thank those military guys for their service, because it was bad. So you would go into the room, and an interesting thing about Tariq Aziz is that he wanted everyone to think he was crazy. And the military said, Mr. Sandy, there's no need to interview him. He'll come in the room, he will go in the corner of the room, and he will defecate, and he'll wipe himself and come over and want to shake your hand. And they said, are you sure you want to talk to him? And I said, yes, I do.
Just don't shake his hand.
Well, I never said I was smart, Morgan. I did shake his hand.
Oh my God.
I did shake his hand.
I shook your hand.
Yeah, you did. But I did that he was not going to get anything over on me. And his first question to me was, how many different languages can you speak? And I said, let's get this off to a good start, Mr. Aziz. I ask the questions and you answer. And I said, Mr. Aziz, how many languages do you speak? And he goes, 7. And he looked at me and says, now, let me see how you are doing. Tell me, how many different languages can you speak, sir? And I said, 2. And he goes, what are they? And I said, English and Appalachianese. And he said, there's not such a thing as Appalachianese. So
you ain't from West Virginia, are you, son?
Yeah, that's how we started. And we talked day one, and I said, Mr. Aziz, we haven't accomplished much today, but I said, I'm coming back tomorrow. Is there anything you'd like for me to bring to you? And he goes, grapes, and can you get me a Cuban cigar? I said, I will do my best. And I went to one of the PXs and I got grapes and a Cuban cigar. And on day 2, I came and I gave them, and he says, you're the first person. He spoke great English. You're the first person that ever asked me if I wanted something. And he says, I thank you for bringing me these grapes and the cigar. And I said, okay. So we talked and we again gathered a relationship there. And on day 3, before I left on day 2, I said, Mr. Aziz, how would you like to get out of prison for a day? And he says, I would really like that. So working with the great, and this is a great group, guys, the Utah National Guard, unbelievable group of men. Mm-hmm. They worked the Olympics, and they arranged for me to take him to the CPA Palace. So we go and we're on Sniper Alley. We go and we get into the compound, and we're walking down the hall, and this means so much to me, guys, and that is, we walk by a room and they're playing ESPN, and Marshall is playing Kansas State, Marshall University. And on ESPN said, if Marshall can hold on, it'll be the biggest victory in their school history. Kansas State was rated 6th in the nation. Mm-hmm. And I looked at Mr. Aziz and I said, Mr. Aziz, would you mind if we go in here and sit on this couch for a few minutes? And he goes, where else would I go? Back to jail?
Good point.
So we sat there, and Marshall wins. Marshall beats the number 6 rated team in the nation. And I'm giving this Iraqi woman a high five and everything. And I said, Mr. Aziz, I said, let's go to the interview room. And we go in that room, and he looks at me and he goes, been a long time since I've seen someone so happy. I don't understand why you're so happy about a sporting event. Why? And I tell him the story about me watching TV when the Marshall plane crash was announced on the news, the death of all those people, and that's why I went to Marshall University. And he looked at me and says, I believe in you. I trust you. What do you want to know? And I said, I want to know where the money went. I want to know about weapons of mass destruction. And he says, weapons of mass destruction. You were about a year too soon. You're too soon. I will help you with the money. And
what did he mean by you were a year too soon?
Because they had purchased, and I found the records. They had purchased titanium missile casings from North Korea that were never delivered. In the article, you will see the money laundering showing how they purchased the missile casings and was able to circumvent the United Nations sanctions.
Yeah, and I've got that article up in front of me. It's it's one of those old legal pad sheets or whatever. It's a line sheet, and you've got just a hand drawn diagram showing how this all happened.
And that's not my writing. That is the Deputy Prime Minister of Iraq, Tariq Aziz, writing.
Oh, and I see al-Bashar. Are we talking the same one in Syria?
Mm-hmm. Yep. And if in the documents, this was money laundering at its best form. The money went from the government to a trading company through numerous other channels to eventually made it to the Toshong company in the purchase of the missile. And interesting is, even on the last stage of the money laundering, Saddam was supposed to get a 10% kickback from the purchase of the titanium missile casings. So that again, this is money laundering at the international level.
Well, and I love the title of your article too, because it really puts it in perspective. It was International Financial Terrorism, Organized Crime of the 21st Century. That's really what it's become. I mean, Saddam Hussein was an organized crime. He was a criminal that just happened to have a military. We happened to run a country. He's nothing more than and actually one of the people we've got coming up, we have scheduled, was a guy who was a made member of the Colombo crime family. And it's just, that's what he was. They basically, this was their version of La Cosa Nostra, except it was called the Iraqi National Military, and he was in charge of the government.
Yes, it's so to answer your question, if you can investigate a narcotics organization, you can investigate corruption in government. The same skills that are there, you use both. So
the same skills, but is it also the same kind of schemes? Do they do things generally the same way?
I believe every organization's different. If someone tells you it's the same old, they're kind of, I disagree with them. Everyone does something a little different. And in this particular case, the flow of the money was, again, pure money laundering at the international level. And until we got the records and got Mr. Aziz to cooperate, this was unknown.
What was Saddam going to do with those missile casings?
That was, according to Mr. Aziz, that would be the what it was. It was the casings that would be the propellant. You would put the propellant in for the missiles. So that's what those were for.
So, but what you're saying is that we were a year too soon, but it was obviously Saddam's ultimate goal to obtain some kind of WMD, right?
That was what Tariq said. But again, we were way too early in regard to that.
But he was using these money laundering schemes and everything else to finance the acquisition of these WMDs, right? So
right.
You might say we're too early, or the question is, were we at the right time and prevented him from getting that?
Right.
Is your cup half full or half empty? Yes.
Yeah, because it's just like Kim Jong-un, and guys like that, the Ayatollahs in Iran. I wouldn't trust them with any kind of WMDs, But
right.
So go through. Here's interesting, because if folks go back and watch some of the clips, and for those of you players who are old enough, you saw Tariq Aziz on TV. He was articulate. He was well spoken. Knew how to communicate effectively. And for you to have to do that relationship with him in 3 days, I mean, that's amazing, because this guy could have played you for the entire time you're there, and you never could have got anything.
Right. It was so interesting when after I typed up my report, and that's something to say. And I'm sure Steve, when he was working his cases now in Colombia, your every day is your work.
Yeah.
I mean,
you
eat, you live it. Thank you. You eat, you sleep a little bit, but you work. And so when I typed up my report on this, I was called into the particular governmental agency's office. And I'll never forget this. They said, "What interrogation technique did you use to obtain this information?" And I looked at this guy straight in the face and I said, "I interviewed him."
College football.
I interviewed him, and they said, "What did you promise him? What did you do, or whatever?" And I said, I I just interviewed him. I said, that's what I've done for decades is I interview people. And they thought that was strange that grapes, Cuban cigars, and a football game, Steve.
Whatever it takes. I mean, that's the sign of a good interviewer is you've got, as much as you hate to sometimes, you've got to come across a common ground there. And if you want to gain ground, you've got to show them respect.
Yeah. And,
sometimes you got to take one for the team when you interview people, like
Right.
interviewing rape suspects, sexual assault suspects. You can't, if you let the thing is, you could have gone over there and let your personal bias get in the way, and that would have ruined the entire interview. You could have said, you're scum. You kill. I mean, let's kind of bookend this here too. How many people do we think Saddam Hussein was probably responsible for killing?
Mm-hmm. Oh, especially the other person I interviewed, the ambassador to Switzerland, Barzan. And also then when he screwed up in Switzerland, he became the chief of police for Iraq. I mean, he killed more Kurds than we'll ever know.
Wow.
And by the way, Morgan and Steve, type in the hanging of Barzan al-Turkidi, and you'll see all the weights on his legs, and notice what happens when they hang him. His head pops off. But
we'll talk about that too later, because I saw the video of when they did that to Saddam Hussein, when they executed him.
Yeah.
But again, that's what I go back to. These guys were more than just criminals. They were killers. They were mass killers.
Oh.
They killed people just for the sport. I mean, you had Saddam Hussein's sons, and now you had this. I think it was. I don't know if that happened before. I mean, obviously it happened before you got there. I'm not sure when, but he killed some of the soccer team or whatever because they failed to win a game.
I interviewed Morgan, the head of the Iraqi Olympic Committee, and it was the longest interview that I'd ever had in my life because I had to write my questions in English. They would
translate them
to Arabic because he could not talk. Uday had his tongue cut out, so he had no tongue. He couldn't talk. So everything had to be written back and forth. Oh my goodness, it took hours and days, and it led into days and everything else. It was the toughest interview I've ever had. He could not talk.
Man, just the depravity of some of these folks, and you wonder what kind of a world is out there. There are people like this, and when they get into power, what's the old saying? Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
When you've got absolute power over a country, look at the things. Cut people's tongue out because they didn't win a game.
Yeah, again, both of you are law enforcement officers. Just imagine writing, translating. I mean, it took forever.
I don't have a story that even matches yours, but my longest interview involved, we had a drive-by shooting one night, and the victims were from South America that spoke a South American Indian dialect.
Mm-hmm.
And so we couldn't find anybody. So we actually had to, back in the day, they had what they called AT&T Language Line. I ran up the biggest bill the department's ever had using AT&T Language Line because we had to ask the guy in Spanish. I had to ask the guy in English, who translated it to a guy in Spanish who could then speak the South American Indian dialect. And then they replied back in Indian. He translated it to Spanish to this guy who's translated it to English and me. And it wasn't that big of an interview, maybe a 30-minute interview, which would have been if you and I had been talking, was 3 hours. So I think the bill was $500 or $600. They go, right? What the hell is this? Man, they're victims, pal. What do you want me to do? But anyway, like I said, doesn't even match your story of doing that. But again, these are things you overcome, cultural things, you overcome logistical things, environmental things. At what point do you think it was that third day when Tariq kind of goes, he just gave it up. He liked you enough to say, I'm going to tell you everything. I mean, he had to hold back something, right?
Everyone like that would. You need to have that ace left over. But what I obtained from him, the people that were upper levels above me were pleased with what we were able to obtain. And in this, information, they learned this. The Iraqi intelligence and the way the Iraqis do business, this is Russian. So even to this day, with the war in Ukraine, the information on how to conduct and move money is, I am confident, don't know firsthand, but I am confident that what we learned in Iraq is benefiting law enforcement, Interpol across the world.
So people think we're just a bunch of dumb hillbillies. And here, Mr. Hillbilly Jeff Sandy volunteers to go over to the Great Desert to take on, arguably the number 2 guy in the Iraqi regime and convinces him to talk. Wow. Yeah. Well, we're a bunch of dumbasses, aren't we?
Yeah. Guys, this may be an interesting story for your listeners, and that is, I was in the control room, when the farmer called in stating he knew where Saddam was. And so they went to the area and they could not find Saddam. And that farmer called and he cussed our people out right and left. So he said, "You walked right over the pit where he's at." So they go back the next day and they find Saddam, they arrest Saddam. And I had the opportunity to interview the farmer. And I said, "Sir," I said, "you had the highest ranking Iraqi official, Saddam Hussein, on your property. Wasn't that an honor for him to trust you to keep it there?" He goes, "All money. It's all about money." He goes, "I heard that they were offering hundreds of thousands of US dollars for his capture. And when he would pay me the $1,000 a week to stay in the cell," he goes, "I could see in the stainless steel case he was running out of money. So it's all about money, Mr. Sandy."
He bled him dry and then he ratted him out.
That's exactly right.
My kind of guy.
Story. That's a great
How much was Saddam worth?
I cannot tell you, because the monies that I
meant, how much was he worth for the reward?
I knew that. I'm thinking it was like $50,000 is what it was.
Well, hell, you had a higher bounty than that, Murph. Look at you. You're 5 times the worth of Saddam Hussein.
I'm sure you can find that on the internet. Maybe that's what Steve's doing, but it was more money than what was left in his case.
Oh, man gets $30 million for Saddam's son's tip.
Yeah. Okay.
For his sons, that's Uday.
For Saddam.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Some farmers live in
25 million.
Yeah, I do not remember, guys. Sorry.
Did you get a finder's fee or anything?
But were you talking to me, Morgan?
Yeah, I'm going. Didn't you get a finder's fee? I mean, you're in the country.
No, sir.
No finder's fee.
No,
See, you're stunned silence. What is he saying? No,
no finder's fee.
25 million for 30 million for Saddam. I mean,
yeah. I forwarded to you when I came back from Iraq. I appeared on ABC News with Peter Jennings, and if you have an opportunity to watch that, I'm so proud of what we were able to do to keep the money out of the terrorist hands. In the Juan Zarate, who was the one of our high-ranking officials with the Treasury, testified in front of Congress, and very proud of his recognition of our team, what our team accomplished. And Morgan, you asked me about embarrassing moments. One night, one night, I've traced like $8 million to a bank account in Lebanon, wire transferred in the bank account. And obviously you've got the time difference and everything, but we tried to get the State Department to put a freeze on that. And it was just the timing. We just couldn't accomplish it in time. And a person who was identified as a terrorist went to that bank and withdrew $2 billion of the 8 before we could get it frozen. And you're there, and that just goes through you. If you have any type A personality, like I'm sure all of us on this podcast are, I know definitely Murphy is, but
I'm not. I don't know why everybody says that. I'm not.
But when you lose like that, when that guy walked in that bank, got that $2 million, I mean, my fist was like, I mean, I was hitting things.
Because somebody that you needed back in Washington is sitting on their lazy ass rather than getting in there and getting their job done, and you're out in the field risking your life. You're like, get your butt back in the office.
Yeah. Well, again, I can't.
Well, that's not an embarrassing moment. That's a moment of genuine professional frustration, and that I'm talking about embarrassing. Like you walked out of the restroom, you left your fly open, and Tariq Aziz called you on it. I mean, that's what I'm talking about. Not you are such a good guy. You go, it's embarrassing because they got $2 million. Well, no, just from a professional standpoint, it's like you're seeing it there, and then it disappears in front of you. Because on the other hand, you're going, where's that $2 million going? Who's it going to be used against?
And what Jeff is, he's a humble man who has done an exceptional job. And it's not that we're having to pull it out of you, but he wants to make sure that the credit goes to everybody, not just one person. And that's very, very admirable, Jeff.
Well, we will post this article. We'll post the video that you sent us. That'll all be on the website for everybody to see so they can read it. But let's go back to that, because like you're on the ground for 120 days. And I was going back that Tariq is obviously, he does, these guys don't give you everything. Nobody ever gives you everything. But what do you feel in terms of what you thought he had to give versus what he gave you? How close did he come to giving you 100%?
Well, Morgan, I would just be guessing. Guessing. But what I do know, that for every dollar that we were able to stop from getting into terrorist hands was, to build a roadside bomb is about $20. Okay. All the money that we were able, my last day there, General Taylor said, if we ever invade a country again, the people that we will be contacting first, if we're going into the country, is number one, we're having our special forces go to the financial institutions, okay, and secure it. And two, you Treasury agents will be here on our side. You guys have saved thousands of American lives. That's all I needed, Steve and Morgan, for a general to say that about some pencil pusher guys that are carry guns.
Yep.
But if I know we're probably running out of time, but I got to.
No. Look, we go as long as we need to go. We're here as long as as long as you don't pass out. Just tell me where you are in case you pass out. We'll get you help.
Yeah. I'll tell you a story. And again, our military guys are just so, I'm leaving the prison one afternoon, and these two Army guys are squatted down behind this stucco brick stone wall or whatever. And I said, "Hey guys, what's wrong?" And he says, "We're taking sniper fire." And I said, "Well, thanks for telling me. I just drove up here." and he said, "Hunker down." And he goes, "Hunker down. And as soon as we get the clear, I'll tell you guys. And what I want you to do is floor your vehicle and get out of here as soon as possible." So 10 minutes pass, 20 minutes pass. And I said, "Have you heard anything?" And he said, "Let me check." And he radios, and they said, "Okay, it's been 45 minutes since our last shot. Do what I told you, floor it and go out." I floored that Nissan vehicle, and about that time I hear ding. and about 24 inches going into the back door is a, you can tell it's either the round went through the door and through the floorboard of the car.
Whoa.
The next day, needless to say, I had some conversations with the guys.
Oh, geez.
Yeah.
That's not a comfortable feeling.
Look at, here we are laughing about it. I just took a sniper. I mean, you really for real, not like other people that may have claimed they took sniper fire. You took sniper fire.
Oh, but yeah, it was. But he told me right. He said, floor it. If I would have went out slow.
Yep. He got you. Oh
my God.
And then one time we're in downtown Baghdad, and we're in a traffic jam.
And that is the worst. I've seen the videos of Army vehicles, the Humvees or whatever they have out. They do not stand still. They push cars out of the way. You do not get stuck in those things.
Right. So when I would travel with them, now see, the prison was all inside what we call a secure area. So when I left there, the sniper was, off the grounds. But we're downtown Baghdad in the Utah National Guard colonel. We trained on this. You had the same seat every time, and my seat was the second row passenger. And in the back area, they would roll down the third row seat, and the guy had the saw machine gun. So we're there, stopped in traffic, and what they were doing at that time was they would walk toward your vehicle with their hand behind their back. And when they got up to you, they would pull that hand out and toss the explosive device. And guys, I'm there, and the colonel says, he's coming. Authorization to shoot. And those of you who have shot the M4s, if you're a right-handed person, it's tough shooting that gun from your left-hand shoulder. And I was pulling back on that trigger, and about that time, when I had authorization to shoot, the guy showed his hands, and I'll forever be thankful that guy showed his hands. That
he doesn't know how close to death he came that day.
Yeah, I was. But I'll never forget that. That colonel with the Utah National Guard says, "You have authorization."
Well, it's lucky the SAW weapon, the squad automatic weapon, didn't open up, because that would have ripped the guy in half.
Yeah,
that's 5.56, man. That would have stitched him. That would have cut him in half.
Well, Murphy, the way we were positioned was he just had the back, and he could not flip around to the side window side. He could shoot if it was behind him. So that was very the teamwork between FBI. Every Sunday, the FBI at the compound there would invite us over for dinner, and the ATF that was there, Secret Service that was there, people pulled for one another. And I'm sure when you were down in Colombia, people were pulling. If you didn't have people pulling the rope in the same direction, you're in trouble.
Yep, absolutely.
And it just figures, who has the best chow? Frickin' FBI.
Yeah.
I always thought it was the Air Force.
Yeah, well, the Air Force is your military, but on DOJ, you want to eat well, go wherever the FBI is. They eat well, they travel well, but
Hey, guys, in Baghdad, at Camp Slayer, where I was at, you talk about, you'd get in line, you'd go in, and I would see hot dog buns that had mold on them, green hot dogs, etc. And everyone would it was like you walk through and you go out the exit door, and they had boxes of MREs. So everyone would grab. It was an interesting environment.
And MREs are not, they sound good in theory.
Oh, let me tell you, you want to try some bad MREs, try Colombian MREs. They The only good thing in it, they had this little packet of chocolate powder that you could mix with water to create like a chocolate drink. But typically, when you're out on patrol, you always run into kids, and that's what you give them.
Well, you didn't like the rubber chicken necks that you guys were eating at the base?
The MREs were worse than that.
Oh my God!
Yeah.
But what I was going to say is, Jeff, I worked with a lot of IRS throughout the years. When I was in Colombia, we had an IRS agent that I think they came in on 60 or 90-day TDYs, and they would rotate. And then I ended up in North Carolina in Greensboro. And whenever we were going to start an OCDEF case, you always wanted an IRS agent on board because they could get access to the tax records that we couldn't see, but they could add additional charges depending on what they found. And then eventually I ended up down in Atlanta running the OCDEF strike force and had a full IRS group of agents in there with us. I've never met an IRS agent that has come anywhere close to doing the things that you've done. And I'll give you an example. In the strike force, we were going out on a case, and this guy was bringing in ecstasy and things like that through the mail from Europe. And so we wanted to go in. We had a search warrant for his house, but we wanted to knock on the door and do it. We wanted him to cooperate with what we wanted because we wanted an international indictment. And apparently this guy saw us coming up the driveway, or saw my guys coming up the driveway, and he didn't answer the door. And they saw him peeking out the window as they're walking up, and they thought, okay, we got to do this the hard way. Well, apparently when they kicked the door at the exact same time, he shot himself under the chin. Now, he lived, believe it or not, but they didn't hear the gunshot. Well, on the raid was a female IRS agent. And whenever they were going to leave the office, they had to go to the SAC and get written permission. And she and I were friends. I'm just going to say her name, Rebecca, her first name. So I love the lady, super lady. Dude, she would do anything she could to help us. But I mean, they were so restrictive on what they could do. So this raid is over, and this female agent comes back in, and she is close to retirement. And she comes and knocks on my door, and I'm the director of the strike force. And she says, "Mr. Murphy, can I talk to you for a minute?" And I said, "Sure, come on in." She said, "I got to tell you, in all my years of an IRS agent, that is the most excitement I've ever had, anything I've ever done." And I'm thinking, and you're coming up on like a 30-year retirement? And all you do is walk up the driveway and follow the guys in the house and just do a search warrant. So it's very reassuring to hear, your stories. And I mean, some of the guys that were rotating in from IRS to Colombia, it was a 60 or 90-day party, quite honestly, for them. We weren't getting a lot of, they would do anything you ask them, but anything proactive, it wasn't going to happen.
Well, I think that's the West Virginia upbringing, that we did not have much. I remember, guys, I remember wearing baseballs out and taking dental floss and restitching the baseball to keep on using it when I was a kid.
Hey, you know what? If you're going to get in there and do the job, get in there and do the damn job. Who wants to sit back on their butt and be bored all the time?
Right.
Well, let's speak of doing this job real quick, because I don't want to leave this before we kind of close out Baghdad. So, like we're talking about Tariq Aziz, he's holding back, obviously, but I love what you said is that, look, it's also the amount of dollars you took off the street to keep them from building these bombs, keep them from killing American soldiers, British soldiers, innocent civilians, like that. Were you supposed to be there for 120 days, or did you get extended, or was that what your tour was going to be?
It was, and then a new group came in. A new group of agents came in. So, and they did a fantastic job too, because I read their reports, and of course, we had team members that testified in Congress, in front of Congress, and in the United Nations Oil for Food fraud. The two other agents that were with me, they spent a lot of time working with the United Nations on that fraud. And that's a conversation you could speak for hours about. Saddam was, rather than selling oil, the United Nations gave him money to feed the poor, needy kids of Iraq.
Yeah, right.
And instead, he pocketed that money and continued to sell oil on the black market. And the IRS guys did a fantastic job working that part.
Well, let's talk about you and Tariq, because it took you 3 weeks just to get authorization to see him, and so now, like, after about the first month is when you really start getting stuff. How did things unfold after that? In other words, what other things did he lead you to? What other discoveries did you make? And did you have a big aha moment? I mean, did you end up finding something that was like, we had no idea this was going on?
Well, what he did, like in any case, is after we exhausted the monies, he directed me on who I needed to talk to, which was just fantastic. Like, for example, Barzan al-Turkidi, the former ambassador to Switzerland, and then that he helped me during my interviews with him. Because, for example, I had a document in a folder and spoke to Barzan for 3 hours, and he said, no, 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 no. And finally, at 3 hours, I opened the folder and said, Barzan, why are you lying to me? Look right here. He goes, okay, yeah, I lied to you. I mean, that's the way their attitude was. They were allowed to lie, So Barzan was the most evil man that I've ever met in my life. And guys, I meant this. I said, Mr. Barzan, I will come back, pay for it myself to watch you hang. And if I would have known when they were going to hang him, I would have paid my own way there. One of the most evil men. When he was ambassador to Switzerland, he got in an argument with one of Saddam's number one bodyguards. He killed him. He killed him in his room in Switzerland. He cut up his body and put it in suitcases and wrapped the suitcases with saran wrap and everything, and shipped the body back to Iraq.
Oh, geez.
Back to Iraq. He got removed from being the ambassador to Switzerland because of that killing, famous. And I had Barzan take off his shirt because he kept telling me, and I didn't believe a word he said, he kept telling me Saddam had him shot. And this is the truth, guys. I've never seen a body. He had over 40 bullet holes in his body.
Wow.
How the hell did that son of a bitch survive?
Well,
somebody's a bad shot in the Iraqi army, I can tell you that.
I mean, so he says Saddam comes to visit him in the hospital, and he says they told him before they said they were going to kill him that it was Saddam who wanted him hit. But he said when Saddam came to see him, he said, the last thing I was going to ask Saddam, why were you going to have me killed? Because he thought they would kill me right there. Mm-hmm. But he was just evil. He said the Kurds deserved to be killed, and he was just an evil guy.
And the Kurds, in my opinion, the Kurds are good people. Dealt with some of them in life after DEA on a contract job. And
Murphy, you'll like this since it appears we're Sig Sauer guys. Mm-hmm. We went to do a search warrant without a search warrant at Barzan's house. Mm-hmm. And I was out there with the military, and we would go after curfew. And I went to the maintenance people, and I got a sledgehammer. So I get out of the Humvee with a sledgehammer, and this military guy, really nice guy, looks at me and he says, "What do you got that sledgehammer for?" And I said, I want to get in the house. He goes, "You're not using that damn thing on my watch." And he takes a tank and knocks the front door down.
That trumps the sledgehammer every time.
It does. But Barzan had serial number 1 on every SIG weapon that had been made to that point.
Oh, you're kidding.
No, serial number 1.
Wow.
Sir, I present to you my SIG 239 with a laser sight.
I converted mine from 40 to 357 SIG on that one.
Well, I'm an equal opportunity. I have a SIG, I have a Beretta, and I have a Glock in addition to a long gun. So I'm an equal opportunity fighter. So
Good.
but let's wind up and talk about just finishing up with Tariq. Why did he cooperate with you? I mean, I know you're a nice guy. You gave him grapes. You gave him a Cuban cigar. By the way, how could you legally get Cuban cigars over there? Was there kind of a wink, wink, nudge, nudge, or did Saddam have a stash of these things?
No, they sold them at the PXs at the airport. International. That's the story. At the international airport, they sold Cuban cigars. They sold them at the PXs, etc. So whoever was a supplier, there was no.
They got him.
Yeah, they got
So
him.
why would Tariq talk to you? I mean, you gave him grapes and a cigar. Don't tell me that's all it took to get the number 2 guy in the Iraqi government to cooperate. I mean, was that it, or was there more? Why would he cooperate with you?
You're probably going to say, what a terrible interviewer you are. I never asked him why he cooperated, but the information that he provided was reliable and it was accurate. And the flow chart that he wrote in his own hand was accurate. We were able to go to the bank and trace and find the records. And so he provided good information.
Did he ever ask you for something, for his benefit too? Like said, hey, say good things about me for the trial. Did he ask for anything in return?
The only thing he ever asked for was for his family. His family lived in the United States, and he said that he would greatly appreciate it if we could ever arrange for him to visit his family in America. That's the only thing that he wanted, and I did not have the authority to grant that to him.
Or the desire.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us about this winding up now. So by the time you get done with Tariq, how do you end things with him? I mean, does he know at some point you're leaving, or do you keep that confidential?
I did not give him that information. I was so busy running the leads from the information that he had provided that on a rare occasion, I would go back to the prison to interview someone else, and I would meet with him just for a few minutes and ask him some follow-up questions, but it dwindled down.
So from the beginning, like I said, you really started about month 2 is when things really started kicking in, right after the 3-week wait, getting past the getting to know you period, where did the extent of his cooperation basically max out, or his information? Were you like 2 months in, 3 months in, because you said it started tapering off. How long did it take you to get most of what you needed?
Within the first month. But I worked on the intelligence that he provided during the remaining time that I was there. Mm-hmm. That's how voluminous it was.
And he's doing all of this from memory, right? I mean, did he have was he good from that standpoint, having like an encyclopedic memory, or did he just?
He was not crazy. He was a very intelligent man. Very, very intelligent. And again, he told me certain documents existed. We found them. And he was right on the money.
Out of that 3, and sorry about that, for some reason somebody wants to do something big, right? It's my house, Steve. I think it's somebody mowing something right next to my studio here. But out of that $300 billion, how much did you think you could account for between you and your other teams later? Did you ever come up with that estimate?
We documented and just to educate your public, President Bush did something that goes under the radar, and he was able to negotiate the United States government getting access to the SWIFT system, SWIFT. And Mr. Murphy knows what that is. If you have access to that, you can follow money all over the world. And because we had access to that, Morgan, we were able to trace the money. For example, traced $2 million to Russia, to the National Fisheries Bank. 2 embassy members for the Iraq and the Russian embassy went to the bank after Saddam was captured and made a withdrawal. And needless to say, they're not with us today. They paid the ultimate price for taking that $2 million. But we traced monies, you name it, United States, Canada, Philippines, South America, all over the world. It was we had the key, and we used the key well.
Yeah, like SWIFT is basically an interbank messaging system, right? So you can track everything. And that's why I don't remember when President Bush came out and they talked about SWIFT. A lot of people had no idea what that really was. A lot of people don't realize how the financial transactions move around the world. Where is the most, I guess there would be no, like, where's the most shocking place you found money being taken, or transferred to? But clearly, I mean, you've got Russia they were friends of Saddam. I mean, it's very clear that they were friends of theirs. What about Iran? What about some other nations we would consider, state sponsors of terrorism?
Definitely not Iran.
Well, I know because they got into the fight. But my question was that would be shocking if any money, showed up in Iran.
Right. A lot of the money went to Syria, Morgan. A lot of the money went there. But one of the things and we kind of hit upon this when you are going to show the flow chart. But one of the things that is so important, Iraq had unbelievable abilities to set up front companies. And they set up front companies throughout the world. In one of the letters which we obtained during the Barzan search warrant, I found a letter in his file that he wrote to Saddam. And he talked about the setting up of bank accounts in front companies and also placing monies in individuals that had no idea that the money was ever in their name. So that is the question in which no one has been able to tell me to date. And that is, and maybe no one knows, but if Saddam would have got out of Iraq, he might have been alive today.
Well, he would have had money everywhere.
He would have. And many times we sat there and looked at one another in Baghdad over chow, and we would say, why didn't he leave? Why? He knew it was coming down. The only thing that we could think of is the fact that he might have thought that if he could, the Americans would come and the Americans would quickly leave. And he did not calculate that America was going to stay.
Wow. And that ended up being a very long war, obviously, along with the Afghanistan war and stuff. Man, there's just, there would be so much there to unpack, and we could do this for a long time, but we want to be respectful of your time. So let's just kind of finish up, because you did a couple interesting things. One is you became sheriff of the own county of the county where you grew up in. So when how you retired from the IRS when?
2005.
And what'd you do after that?
I was hired by a great company out of Washington, D.C., and they hired me and several DEA agents, retired DEA agents, FBI, mostly IRS special agents, and we went into banks all across the United States and helped them develop anti-terrorism programs that would help them to keep terrorism money from coming to their banks, also narcotics money and so forth. So I'm very proud of what we accomplished there. And of course, as you mentioned, the Arabic charities, many of those we worked there.
That money went, go ahead.
Who funded all you guys to go into the banks to create the anti-terrorism programs?
The financial institution, the banks themselves would pay for us to come in.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very nice.
All you have to do is a little bit of research, and you can see some of the big names, UBS, some other ones, folks that got hammered with facilitating money laundering and stuff like that. And a lot of them spent a lot of money, just not on that, but on rehabilitating their image.
Right. And that's a good point, Morgan, because banks are not, they're in the business to make money off our money. they're not going to frivolously spend money unless they're being fined unbelievable amounts. And it sounds like they're doing a good thing, to help protect Americans, but it's all about so we don't have to pay that damn fine again.
Absolutely. And to give you an example, I worked a case in New York, Miami, and New Orleans where this company actually had their own armor trucks. Wow. And we worked with the U.S. Attorney's Office, and those people were indicted. And the bank president called me in and pointed at me and said, "Mr. Sandy, you do not realize the millions, with an M, millions of dollars that you saved my investors." Wow. So we helped the banks. We saved them from getting hit, like you said, Morgan.
Oh, man. Yeah. Well, and look, I did some work with the banks way back in the day, too, but they will spend $1 million to solve a $10 million problem when it deals with their image and reputation and not having this happen. But so you do that. But I'm interested in how you got to your current position, but that was by way of being sheriff. But it was one term. Why?
Because my political party, I was the party went to a completely different color, but I lost by 0.00. It was very close, but close only
counts in horseshoes and hand grenades.
But I believe, Morgan, everything happens for a reason. And I was hired by Department of Justice to work with a great program called SLAT, State and Local Anti-Terrorism Training. Mm-hmm. And I was blessed in that I actually had trained law enforcement, over 144,000 law enforcement in 49 states. Wow. And when I found out the governor was going to offer me this job, I called them and said, "Please arrange training in Alaska." I've been to
that would be number 50.
50, and they arranged it. So I went to Anchorage and taught the class. So 50 states. Of interesting story, on December 16th, 2016 at 1:36 p.m., the governor of West Virginia, Jim Justice, who's just doing a fantastic job here, called me and said, "I'd like for you to be my cabinet secretary." Then it was called Military Affairs Public Safety. And I said, and I was joking with him. I said, "So, Mr. Justice, you want me to take $164,000 a year pay cut?" And there's a long pause. And he goes, "Would you?" And I said, "Absolutely." I said, money. I said, I want to help the state of West Virginia. And he's just done a fantastic job here in West Virginia and has been very supportive of. We formed our fusion center. The governor gave us $1.8 million, and we formed a narcotics intelligence unit. And guys, we can tell you the days that people are bringing dope in from Detroit, Columbus, Cleveland, Akron. We can tell you the days. We can tell you the time periods. We've got LPR readers, license plate readers. We are kicking butt. And tomorrow, due to our governor, the importation of fentanyl comes into law in West Virginia. If someone is listening to this from Detroit, you bring fentanyl into West Virginia after the 10th, minimum mandatory 10 years in our prisons here.
Fucking A, about time.
Excellent.
Yeah, 10 years. And we are the Narcotics Intelligence Unit. We have hired geniuses. Murphy, these people make you and I feel like we're not very smart. We've hired these kids from Marshall University, West Virginia State, West Virginia University, that are geniuses in knowledge of computers. And we have been able to infiltrate drug dealers using Bitcoin ATM machines. We've been able, Russian PayPal. we are doing things. We are at the forefront in West Virginia on working drug investigations.
And that's extremely significant because West Virginia, the population of the state isn't that great. It's not one of the major population centers in the United States. But when I remember, it wasn't that long ago, per capita, West Virginia had the reputation of having the largest, body of pain pill abuse in the United States, and that was per capita.
You're exactly, Murphy. And we also, per capita, was leading the nation in overdose deaths.
Yep. And that's horrible. It's like every other state, full of outstanding people, regardless of where you live. There's good people everywhere, and it just tarnishes everybody when stuff like that goes on. But one other thing you kind of skipped over, when Joe Manchin was the governor of West Virginia, he brought you into the Capitol building, into Charleston there also, didn't he?
Yes. He put me on the regional jail board. Mm-hmm. Now, you might be referencing, and you can cut this out, Tom was asked to come back and form the Fusion Center under Manchin. Okay.
Yeah, we're not going to cut it out because we're going to give Tom a hard time when his time comes.
Oh, yeah. I want to find out what's living in his beard these days.
Yeah, well, and our listeners, if you don't keep up with politics, Joe Manchin is one of the senators from West Virginia now. He's Democrat, but he comes across pretty strong on following what he thinks is the right thing to do, which I love. Because, we see all our damn politicians giving into the lobby groups and big business and all, the PACs and all that stuff. It just, it's comforting to see somebody stand up for what they believe in occasionally.
You got it. If I may end with this story, Jeff, in the CPA Palace in Baghdad, they had put up a sign, first free oil shipment from Iraq. And we brought a young girl in. In fact, she was the secretary at the Central National Bank of Iraq to interview. And she gets emotional, starts crying. And we go, have we offended you? Have we hurt you? And the interpreter's there, and the interpreter says, no. And she goes over and puts her hand on the word freedom. And the interpreter, she tells the interpreter, freedom, my people does not know what that means. So when we question what some of our decisions are in this country, I think we should always remember that. So many of these countries, freedom, they do not know what it means. Mm-hmm. And that's why our country, our people better realize it does not matter if you're the blue, green, purple, or whatever party, we're Americans.
Damn right. And the other part that goes along with that, Jeff, you said it earlier in the interview, or you alluded to it. Our freedom here in the United States, we take for granted. It's not free. We just celebrated Memorial Day, and that's to recognize those who gave the ultimate sacrifice so we could be free. So we can sit here and criticize others because that's what freedom is, freedom of speech. So what a great way to end this freaking interview, man. This is outstanding. I loved it. Love it.
Well, Murphy, and let me just tell you this. Your presentation you gave in Columbus, I've met a lot of people in my life, and as you heard, for Department of Justice, I trained over 144,000 law enforcement officers. Mm-hmm. But God bless you, sir, for what you did in Colombia, and I thank you.
Thank you.
I thank you.
And if you could reinforce to Morgan that it's not Krusty Krab, West Virginia, it's Bluefield, West Virginia.
Bluefield, West Virginia is so big, it actually rolls over into Virginia to Bluefield, Virginia.
Thank
That's
you,
it.
sir.
Because they want to be Virginians. Yes.
And
Hey,
now I got to tell one quick funny story.
Okay.
Because Bluefield, Virginia was there at the end of a shift, especially at nighttime, if you got if you got a drunk call or something like that and you couldn't let the guy go, he had to be incarcerated. I've heard stories that cruisers from West Virginia would zip down to the police station in Bluefield, Virginia, and set that person outside the door and then ring their doorbell because their dispatch was on the second floor. And that West Virginia cruiser might scoot back into West Virginia and leave the drunk down there.
Allegedly
might have happened. You heard it here, folks. I wonder what the statute of limitations on that one is, Murph.
It's over. It's over.
Hey, I'll tell you, working in a state that's surrounded by 5 states, the crap that goes on. I've had more mental hygienes brought across the Belpre Bridge in the Wood County, West Virginia, than you can imagine, because they know we've got to drive them to Morgantown for mental evaluation, where they have to take
way the hell out there. Yeah.
All right.
Hey, final thing. We'll end up here. What a great story. Let me ask you. You're sitting in front of your calendar. You're in your office. Graciously gave you this time. Where are you going to be on July 28th of this year?
Probably out there celebrating somebody's birthday.
Because I have a reason for asking this. So as he's looking, he's Mr. Secretary, Cabinet Secretary, personally checking his own calendar. He didn't call somebody in to check it for him. That's how humble of a guy this is.
Yep.
I believe it or not, that I do not have anything on my calendar on July the 28th.
Well, I will be coming into town on July 27th because I will be in your state capital, down at the convention center for a thing called the Digital Government Summit all day on July 28th. So if you're around, I will make Murph buy, but I will gladly bring the money. Legally obtained, I remind you. There will be documentation. And if you're around or if you have the time, let us know. Courtesy of Game of Crimes, we'll provide a dinner to the Jeff Sandy family.
Well, let me offer this to you. I would love if you had the opportunity, I would hold a staff meeting and I would bring in the Colonel of State Police, Commissioner of Corrections, Fire Marshals, you name it. We would have, and I'd introduce you and you could shake hands and say good nothings to all the leaders under Homeland Security, if you're interested.
I'm in. And I'll tell you, I'll talk to you offline about why I'm in, but we actually have a project working right now with the COPS office, the Community Policing Section, and the Virginia State Police and the Virginia Association of Chiefs of Police. We're building out a new tool and a new capability for the public to help police. I think you'd be interested in. So I will take you up on that. And hell, I will tell him I'm here because Murph was too chicken to show up. You know, he was afraid that I would say Krusty Krab, West Virginia. He would break down in tears. Quit saying that. I don't like that.
If I was there and all those other people there, you'd probably get your ass.
Probably beat my ass. I will be very respectful when I have all the state police people in the room. Yes, sir. Well, and being a former trooper, Murph tries to always call me out of it, but I can relate with the state police, being a former state trooper and a detective. We have a thing about the hats. There's the secret society of the round hat. So
most uncomfortable thing I've ever had on my head. Yeah. Murphy, can you send me a address so I can ship these back to you?
You don't ship those things back. First of all, we don't know what you have. You've been over in Iraq. Hell, I don't know what's hanging around your head these days.
You shook hands with Tariq Aziz.
After he didn't wipe, there's no way we're taking this headset back, sir.
Yeah, okay.
But
you cannot disinfect it enough for us to want to take this back now that you told us that story. So, not happening, sir. But
okay. Would you be so kind to allow me to preview your podcast before you publish it?
Because you are a cabinet secretary for the great state of West Virginia, I can make that happen.
Okay.
But only you. Dominic Polifrone, I don't know if you know that guy, but he was the ATF agent who brought down Richard Kuklinski, the Iceman. He wanted to get an advance. I said, no way, not you, but you, sir. I live right next to your state. I don't want to be traveling over to Harper's Ferry or Charlestown, or going there and all of a sudden find out that my vehicle has been reported stolen, or I'm getting body cavity searched and handcuffed and taken to Morgantown for a mental evaluation. Would not make my day.
There you go.
No.
There you go.
And if folks, you can't see me, we only do audio. Thank God. Thank God. All right, wait, look.
Okay, wait a minute. You've got to give Tom Kirk a hard time because he made me do the body cavity search on Carly Gallo that you're going to talk to him about. I'll never let him live that down.
Well, hell, that prepped you then to shake hands with Tariq Aziz.
Yeah, it prepared me. So, guys, it's been an honor. And Mr. Murphy, I meant everything I said. Thank you for what you've done.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you so much. It's been a true honor. I can't tell you how excited I am to have a brother West Virginian on here with us. We have a good time with the state. We know what we are. We're hillbillies, and I'm proud of it. I tell that in every presentation I do. So having you on here to support me against this guy from Kansas,
you're giving him a big head, Jeff. I'm not going to be able to deal with this guy now.
Thank you very much.
Guys, have a great evening.
Hang on,
Thanks,
everybody. We're going to close this out. It's been a great episode. Everybody stay tuned for the debrief. Well, I'll tell you what, if you're just not impressed by Jeff Sandy's story, I don't know what it's going to take. Because, like you say, you think of IRS and you think they're in the office or they've got, just their yellow pad and they're taking notes, and just this guy was out there doing stuff all the time. He's not what you would have thought of as an IRS agent, but you know what? What a great guy. We're having a great time. And by the way, I will be running into him at the end of July. I'm going out for a government summit in West Virginia, which I will be meeting with several key people, and I will be one of the featured speakers. But Jeff said, come on up. We'll introduce you to everybody. And so that's going to be a great time. So I plan on doing that. But also, Steve, I thought it was very good. And we did this with Madison Sperry's episode, but I like what you did. And why don't you tell everybody kind of the reason you did the dedication?
Yeah. And so this episode was dedicated to the Marshall University football team that was killed in the plane crash years ago. And you heard Jeff's story. He graduated from Marshall. His kids all went to Marshall. That was big news when I was in West Virginia because they lost, I forget how many football players.
I think it was over 60. Yeah.
Boosters. A ton of people were killed in that horrific plane crash that day. So, we'd like to have a good time on here, but just for this 1 second, in all seriousness, this is dedicated to the memories of all those killed in the plane crash from Marshall University. God bless you all. God bless your families.
Yeah, God bless the Thundering Herd, and we're glad to see that you guys have, like the Phoenix, arisen from the ashes, and you've returned. So very proud of you guys. And I say that in all sincerity because Kansas State has played them. And by the way, Marshall, the Thundering Herd, will be playing Notre Dame this season. So
wow. So
I think that's right. I think that's what Jeff said. So.
All right. Notre Dame's going down.
Go
kick
Irish.
Their butts, Thundering Herd. You got your job. You got one
your
job. That's to go kick your butts.
Well, we'll see. We'll see what happens. But by the way, guys, speaking of seeing what happens, let's see what happens when you go to Apple and Spotify and hit those 5 stars. It's magic. Stars will appear on your desktop. Unicorns will come racing across your living room. Just magic shit happens when you hit those 5 stars. So just hit. We don't know how it works. We just know it does. Also, head on over to gameofcrimespodcast.com for more information about the show. We constantly update it. We're going to be revising our merch list as well. We've had a lot of requests to do that. We shall be doing that. But also follow us on the social media at Game of Crimes on Twitter, at Game of Crimes Podcast on Facebook and the Instagram. And also head on over to paypal.com and use our email gameofcrimespodcast@gmail.com or paypal.me/gameofcrimes, whatever it makes it easier for you to support the show. But last time, I know we've said this 100 times, so here comes the 101st. Where you got to be, where you got to be, where you got to be. That's 104 now.
Come on over to Patreon and give us a try over here. See what you think about the bonus episodes we're putting in there. Obviously, you get more content the higher level that you do on Patreon, but it's everything from Javier and I telling the story about the Medellin cartel to Chris Feisel and Dave Mitchell talking about the Cali cartel to case of the month to 911, what's your emergency, to you can't make this shit up. It just keeps our Q&A. It keeps going and going and going.
I think we provide more content per dollar than maybe any other Patreon channel on the interwebs.
I tell you what, if anybody's putting more on there, they're doing it every single day because it seems like you and I are recording almost every day.
all this, and it's tough with your travel schedule lately to track your ass down. So we're knocking a bunch of stuff out while I got Murph, and before he goes off to get his next free T-shirt. So, but hey guys, but thank you. We got a lot of great stuff, like I said, coming up. So stay tuned and make sure you go hit that subscribe button, whether you're on Apple, Google, Spotify, Stitcher, podcast catcher, whatever they call them. You know, there's 70 different platforms out there. Just find your subscribe button, hit it, and make sure that we can deliver these episodes to you effortlessly every single week that they come out. So,
and please do go on and rate us.
Rate us, yeah. Give us feedback.
Please give us 5 stars. That's what we're asking for. But I mean, seriously, rate us. Let us know what you think, because that's how we'll adapt to what you want to hear.
Right. And speaking of adapting to what you want to hear, if you want to hear the next episode, I have to close this one out. So,
all right,
I want to say, let's do it then. I want to say thank you guys once again for playing the biggest, baddest, most dangerous game of all and successfully passing every IRS audit, the Game of Crimes.